And hello and welcome to this special 2-hour edition of NewsMax Now. I'm John Bachman. It is caucus night in Iowa, where tens of thousands of Democrats will cast their votes on who their favorite 2020 presidential nominee is going to be. Let's go deeper on the Democratic race here and join our panel. In studio with us tonight, Joe Conason. He's the editor-in-chief of the National Memo, a daily political newsletter. He's also the author of Man of the World, The Further Endeavors of Bill Clinton. And Niala Amaru, I hope I got that right. It's pretty close. I'll get it by the end of the night. Is a Democratic strategist. She's also an Iraq War veteran. She's here in the studio with us as well. Great to see you both. Thanks for coming in. Joel, let's start with you. You know, Iowa can be a kingmaker. It can be a place where you have to beat expectations in order to continue your campaign. As a longtime Democrat, are you surprised to see, number one, that Bernie Sanders is where he is in the polls right now, and number two, that it's so not tight at the top of the polls?
You just outed me as a Democrat, John, but I'm not surprised it's tight. I think the two top candidates, both Biden and Sanders, have powerful, arguments to support their candidacies. On Biden's side, there's the argument that he polls the best against Trump. He's the most experienced and, served as vice president for 2 terms, and therefore he has, the best shot of wrapping up enough votes to defeat the president. Sanders has the argument that he is the candidate of change, and he has a powerful movement behind him. There's no doubt about that. Grassroots, very strong, and they both have deficits as well. So that's what I think Iowa voters are facing, that choice, which one they think is best positioned to take on the president.
Now, you guys have both been in the room when you know the candidate has that it factor, right? They have the audience hanging on every single word. You've probably seen it with Barack Obama or any other. Donald Trump had it in 2016. They say Bernie Sanders might have something similar this time now. Do you think that movement is really what's propelling Bernie Sanders to this position? And does that continue throughout the entire campaign?
I think it depends. I think to the point that was already made, Bernie Sanders has definitely a movement behind him. And that movement is what's going to be able to sustain him, which has sustained him since 2016 when he primaried Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. I think ultimately at the end, the winner, after all is said and done, is going to have a multiracial, diverse coalition because the Democratic Party is such a diverse base. You have your moderate/centrist, you have your progressives, you have people in between. And so I think more than Iowa, more than New Hampshire, I think we'll have a better understanding of who that person who will be after Super Tuesday.
And that's the point, you guys. You keep hearing this brought up about Iowa and New Hampshire. And, Joe, that this electorate in these 2 states doesn't necessarily reflect very well the broader Democratic Party. Do you think that's a fair critique?
It is absolutely a fair critique. And in the Iowa caucus, it's even narrower because it's the people who can caucus, which doesn't necessarily include everybody in the state. It excludes, people of all kinds who, for one reason or another, can't go to a caucus. People who've been to a caucus know that's a demanding role. It's not like, voting, even if there's a line to vote.
And God bless the people of Iowa for doing this on a Monday night in the freezing cold.
Yeah, you have to admire them. Yes. However, it's not representative of the country as a whole, and I think Niall is right about that. You have to move on to South Carolina, Nevada, Super Tuesday, California, New York, the states that represent the bulk of the United States, and then all across the South.
And now that almost looks as if that is the playbook that Mike Bloomberg, I should say, has drawn up to skip Iowa, New Hampshire, move on to Super Tuesday. Do you think we're witnessing the last important Iowa caucus, maybe the last super important New Hampshire primary?
Well, I certainly hope so. Time will tell. But to your point, Bloomberg has paid absolutely no mind to Iowa, which is unheard of, particularly within a Democratic primary, because Iowa and New Hampshire play such an outproportion. And the fact that Trump has begun to attack him, I think, has begun to show that his advertising in those states, particularly those swing states, is beginning to have an impact, and the president has noticed.
Well, he would say they're not giving up an inch of ground. They're not. It's a proactive move, not a defensive move. Joe, what do you think about that strategy?
You have to respect Bloomberg as somebody who kind of was an unlikely candidate for mayor of New York, who came in and won over and over again against considerable odds. He knows how to use his money and the skills of his team, who are formidable. So I think people will question the strategy and say, well, if 9 out of 10 or whatever the number is of Democrats who win the Iowa caucus go on to win the nomination, but it's not true in every case. Clinton was defeated badly in Iowa the first time he ran, and he went on and captured the nomination. Lost both Iowa and New Hampshire.
Right, but he claimed New Hampshire as a victory, calling himself the comeback kid. And that, again, goes to show you how important, the spin is afterward. It's not whether you win, it's not who you beat, it's the expectations if you beat them, right? That's really the important thing here.
So today, you saw people trying to play the expectations game in Iowa. Biden team saying, well, we don't expect to do very well, and maybe they won't. But if they do better than that, then they'll come in and say, oh, yes, well, we did better than we led you to expect.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some surprise tonight, whether it's Pete Buttigieg or Andrew Yang. We'll see. But guys, stick around. Nyala, Joe's going to stick around. We're going to talk a little bit more about Iowa. Stay with us. We'll be back more here on this special expanded edition of Newsmax Now. We're keeping an eye. Also on the closing arguments of the Senate impeachment trial. We'll bring you the latest from what's happening in Washington, D.C., as well as Des Moines, Iowa, and the rest of the country. We'll be right back after this.
Do you think it was wrong for him to take that position, knowing that it was really because that company wanted access to you?
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about. No one said that. Who said that?
Don't you think that it's just one of those things where people think, well, that seems kind of sleazy. Why would he have that job if not for who his father was?
Because he's a very bright guy.
I guess the question I'm kind of asking is, was it right?
His appearance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he said he regretted having done it.
Yeah.
Speaks for himself.
Joe Biden having a rough go this morning on NBC's Today Show with Savannah Guthrie, the former vice president, has had a lot of questions coming his way over his son's role on the board of that company, Burisma, the gas company in Ukraine. We'll see if it has any impact on his performance in the Iowa caucuses. Welcome back. And we are joined by our political panel still here with us, Joe Conason. He's the editor-in-chief of the National Memo, a daily political newsletter, and also with us, Nyala Amaro. She's a Democratic strategist and a Iraq War veteran. Great to see you both. Thanks for sticking around. So, Joe, this question about Hunter Biden, if it's not House Republicans or the president asking this question, does this question continue to get asked on the campaign trail of Joe Biden, or does the Hunter Biden issue go away?
If it's not House Republicans or the president, I don't think it'll be asked very much. But they will continue to ask it. And in fact, it's clear from the Republican conduct around this question that they would like to knock Joe Biden out at the beginning. I mean, so in some ways, they've both hurt him and helped him. They've hurt him because it is an appearance of conflict. It doesn't look great that Hunter Biden was on the board of that company, even though it's also clear from what I know that the vice president didn't do anything wrong, did nothing to help him. In fact, did some things that may have harmed him or that company. But the perception among Democrats, among many Democrats, is that the Trump campaign and the Republican Party decided that they would use this to try to take Biden out because poll numbers were showing that he was the greatest threat to Trump, and Trump told people we have to take him out. So that, in a way, is an argument for Biden.
Even though this was covered in all ABC, NBC, they all did reports on this, asking about if Hunter Biden was going to be a liability. I think it was either a Politico or Vanity Fair article asking the question, is Hunter Biden going to be a liability to his father's campaign? Now, when you look at this issue of Joe Biden, let's say he does become the nominee. We know Republicans are going to bring it up then. But does anybody currently in the Democratic pack really have the guts to keep making this an issue?
I don't think it's an issue for the Democrats. I think this was an issue that, and former Vice President Biden mentioned it, the optics are absolutely terrible. But, the situation was investigated and no wrongdoing was found. And so the Republicans are really digging in on trying to push this narrative that Democrats simply aren't buying. I think that Democrats, by and large, are more concerned about the everyday issues, more so than what Republicans are trying to create.
You have to ask yourself whether the Republicans really want to talk about this subject of nepotism or not.
Well, Joe,
because,
I think
Giuliani's son works in the White House. Trump has his daughter and son-in-law working in the White House. His daughter gets licenses from China the day after they go there and make a deal with them.
The question is,
there are a million examples like that.
Those businesses existed before this political run. The question is, Joe Biden's son was on the board of Amtrak, one of the businesses that Joe Biden is most closely associated with, and then gets a job on the board of Burisma, a Ukrainian gas company, despite having no background whatsoever in that field. It's not like, Ivanka, she worked around her father in the hotel business growing up. Joe Biden wasn't working in a gas company in Ukraine.
But why does
Hunter
the
Biden
Chinese,
wasn't
why
going
would the
to
Chinese government do her a favor? What's the reason for
Is
that?
it a favor? I mean,
Yes, they gave
American
her
companies
licenses.
give licenses all the time in China.
The president's daughter. You know exactly what's wrong with it, and why the appearance of that is also a problem.
But this
I'm
is
not
what
saying I'm
my
not saying
question was
they
about
committed a
Democrats,
crime.
but this is something that Bernie Sanders is specifically running against. This type of nepotism, as you call it, this type of swampiness, as Donald Trump calls it. Do you think Bernie Sanders, or at least somebody in his surrogacy field, will continue to make this an issue?
I wouldn't be surprised if ultimately they did. I mean, they went after Hillary Clinton with, similar types of stuff very hard in 2016. They did her a great deal of damage. There's no question about that they could not undo at the end. And
So you think Democrats damaged Hillary Clinton?
I think Sanders supporters damaged Hillary Clinton. There's no question about that.
Okay. Even though she had all the support from the DNC?
Yeah, well, that's a separate question. They were talking about her money and Hillary and her speeches to Goldman Sachs, et cetera, which were obviously ill-advised, really, when you're running for president. But so you're asking me, will Sanders go after Biden about this?
Yes, exactly.
I think if we get close to the end of this and it's still a close race, or at least Sanders thinks it is, he will not hesitate to use this against
And Nyla,
Biden.
do you think that's a winning strategy? If Bernie Sanders does decide to go for that kill shot and bring Hunter Biden and start talking about this issue, do you think that's a winning issue for him?
I don't think it's a winning issue at all. I think that the winning issue for Senator Sanders, if there is one, again, is to continue to dig into the narrative that's already been created about Biden is the status quo/establishment, whatever that means. And he is the hero of the progressive left who will, change the system that is rigged. But I don't necessarily think that continuing to attack and using Trump's talking points is necessarily a winning strategy for Senator Sanders.
I mean, look, the question for Sanders is whether, if he goes on the attack that way, is someone going to eventually, vet him? Because there's much to say about him that nobody has ever said.
We interviewed Peter Schweitzer. He's done the research.
NewsMax has published a lot of this stuff in the past.
We'll certainly continue to talk about it. Nyla Maru, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Joe Coniston, great to see you as always. Look forward to our next conversation, folks.
Thank you
so much.
All right, still with us. Stay with us. More to come here on NewsMax Now. A special Iowa Caucus expanded 2-hour version.